Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all you members of the TSB Nation. I'm Rustin Edwards, based in Geneva, with my illustrious co-host in hot and humid, sunny, sultry Dubai, Mr. Matt Stanley.
Greetings all, happy Sunday. I had the windows open today, doors open, windows open. It was still 35, 36 degrees, but I was just getting rid of the rust. It was nice, liberating.
Well, I wish I could say the same about Geneva. It feels like Mother Nature has decided to flip the switch from our summer weather to winter weather.
Get that gas oil demand going, baby.
Yes, Gasoil demand. Yes.
What is the temperature there now?
Right now it's a balmy 10 degrees outside with wind and rain.
Wow, 32 degrees and sunny here. But I mean, give us some space. We've had obviously 40-degree plus for the last 4 months. It is what it is when you live in different parts of the world, people.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And we come into this week with the end of another week of high volatility in the crude markets. Almost an $8 trading range when you look at the high versus the low, with the high being done on Friday and the low on Wednesday.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was always a difficult one to opine on because, as it always is, I mean, it was clear that when we spoke last week, there was going to be a reaction. We called that. We didn't call it as, obviously we said 50, 60 cents high. I wouldn't say that what it would be on the day, but in the grand scheme of things, when you look at the actual numbers, fundamentally, how much supply would have been knocked out from what's happening, unfortunately, in Israel and Gaza, which obviously will consume the most of our time today. On the supply side, it was negligible. So if you extract that, what it means for prices, fundamentally not much has changed. But the market isn't looking at it that way. It was, and it looks like tomorrow we could wake up, or at some stage today, indeed, every hour, there seems to be a new event unfolding, higher escalation, the threat of higher escalation. Israel have said, for people to evacuate from North Gaza, 1 million people. It's tragic to see what's happening, but it's clear that the fear factor is certainly there in energy markets. And tomorrow, I mean, look, me personally, I could see an easy another $3-4 a barrel uptick in prices at the open, purely on the back of fear and what it may mean. And I know we're going to touch on that. I know you probably disagree with that, but I just think it's not something that it can even be described as bullish, because bullish implies that it's people are getting carried away and it's happy and it's purely from a fear point of view, and war risk premium is being priced in. And I think it's easily got another, I think $3 or $4 a barrel tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised to see 100 by the end of the week.
I would sell your 100 and sell it on. I'm not a believer that we'd see that much of a rally, because typically what happens when you're at any type of global geopolitical strife impacting oil markets is that nobody wants to be short going into a weekend, because things happen over a weekend and you really can't control your price. Therefore, you usually see a large buying coming in on Thursday, Friday, going into the weekend, and then coming out Monday. People reassess the situation, go, okay, so you might get a bit of a pullback, and then rinse and repeat the same pattern towards the end of the next week. Well, we already saw that last week, where we had a nice rally on the open, went all the way up to $89, went all the way back down to $85 as people realized, okay, things are not as bad as we could have thought they would have been. And then you had an extra escalation going into the weekend, which pushed it right back up to $90 again. So it seems like, the $90 is kind of a cap at the moment, because it's hit that point twice in the beginning of this whole escalation. And it is a case of fear, as you said, because there is no direct impact to supply to the market at this point in time. Nobody has shut off any spigots. Nobody said we're not going to transport oil anymore. And if you look at how oil markets have actually changed over the last 50 years, because there's a lot of analysts trying to compare what happened in 1973 to what's happening today, or what's happened at other points of time to what's happening today. And the world has changed a lot, mainly because of the Russian war in Ukraine, where flows have become more focused east of Suez going eastbound, west of Suez staying westbound. and never the twain shall meet at the moment. The U.S. is a net exporter of crude, not an importer of crude like it was 50 years ago. So there are a lot of things that are different now, which to me points to the only real fear that I can see in the marketplace is that something happens with the Straits of Hormuz where Iran slits their throat as well as the throat of everybody else in the Middle East to punish Asia, which makes no sense to me.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's like my parents telling me about, you don't know the summer, you didn't experience the summer of 1976. Right, okay, fine. It's of course it's a moment in history where I know you all had to take a bucket and go to a standpipe so you could wash every day. That was the 70s. Okay, that was the 70s. 1973, it was a moment in history. It was important, especially for the Middle East. It's 2023. Times have moved on. Religion hasn't, politics haven't, and beliefs haven't, and that's why we're still in these unfortunate times. However, when you're looking at it from politics aside, which is very difficult, I know, but everything that's happening in the world right now that is a point of conflict is west of the Suez. What's happening in Russia and Ukraine, which has been going on 19 months now, seemingly it isn't getting better. Issues are still there. Russia are very much focused, more than ever actually, because Putin was out in force this week talking to members of OPEC and talking to the media. He's been in Burkina Faso saying he's going to build a new nuclear power plant this week. There's very much, an acknowledgement of issues that are happening in Europe. And unfortunately, what's happening in Israel and Gaza. Now, yes, from a fundamental point of view, like I said, will there be much disruption to out and out supply? No, but it's the risk factor that people are pricing in.
Yeah, wait, but what's the risk that they're pricing in? Because if there's no disruption to supply, what's the risk?
The Straits of Hormuz, as you said. Okay. If there is a problem with Iran, which I don't really want to get involved in about, to be honest, or opine on, if there is that risk and there is a risk to product flowing out of the Straits, 14.5 million barrels of crude right there, right, every day. So if that does get choked up, if there isn't any way threatened, the risk, the rally is fully justified, in my opinion.
Well, if there is a true risk where you have Iran positioning themselves to a point where they would squeeze off the Straits of Hormuz, I would agree with that assessment. And actually, I would say that the market's underpricing then.
100%, yeah.
However, I think with the current, at least mellow tones, I'm going to call it as you will, that in the I would say the diplomatic push, what it seems that the Saudi Arabian government's doing to try to keep things, everybody level-headed outside of Israel, because it's one thing that if there was a direct alignment within the Middle East about who supports whom and who's getting support by whom,
yeah,
you would see a far larger response by Iran versus Saudi Arabia because of their history and how they always interact with each other, especially when you look at what's happened in Yemen and their support of other organizations around the world. But that being said, none of that's happened yet. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen yet. No, I think and you do have a lot of diplomatic push on, at least from what it seems on Israel, to tone things down a bit.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I disagree with nothing has happened yet. It's been a week since what's happened with Israel and Gaza. And to quote the UN, Gaza is being pushed into abyss as Israel prepares ground offensive. I mean, if you showed that to an oil trader 2 weeks ago, then he would have translated that, or she would have translated that into, oh dear, that's not good. How much is this worth? How much is a headline worth? I don't know. If, for example, this was an attack on another country, an oil-producing country, I'm not going to name one, well, how much would that headline be worth, right? But like you said, it's all about what neighboring countries do, who's on what side of the coin.
Actually, we can look at this because Azerbaijan, oil-producing country, Armenia, having a war could impact, or having strife, which could have impacted pipeline flows. When that flared up and flared down, there's no impact to price whatsoever.
Okay, is that a relevance issue or not? Is that, or is it you know, Azerbaijan, Armenia, obviously, hope everyone's well, and what happened the other week, and you know, it's a long-standing issues that they've got. And excuse my ignorance when it comes to you know, history there, but Israel, Gaza, what's happened, the Arab War, the 6-day war, what happened post Second World War, you know, it's a much deeper reaching global issue than something like Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Yeah, but there you had an actual oil producer. Just same thing
Okay.
with Russia and Ukraine. You've had an actual oil producer, and there was an uptick in oil price when this all took off. But then, you know, where have we ended up 19 months into this? Back to where we were pre-invasion.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, things have stabilized.
So it's a case that, again, you need to see the market is reacting more to a complete shutoff of oil from the oil producing regions of the Middle East versus what is really going to happen, which will probably be no response on oil supply.
Yeah, look, it's one that I'm sure every single trading bench across the world is looking at and thinking, what do we do? Everyone's probably got an opinion. Everyone's probably got a differing opinion.
Well, it's in my opinion, I'll put it out there as that it is a knee-jerk response to the history of the area and the history of oil embargo by OPEC. If this happens, because that has always been kind of like the underlying current of if something happens between Israel and Palestine, it's going to be OPEC cut off supply, because that's what they've done in the past. Now, it has moderated some over the last 10, 15 years because there's been a fair amount of military action on both sides of the coin between Israel and Palestine against Israel. And they never seem to have crossed that Rubicon once again to cut off oil supplies to the West. But the market always has the same reaction. There's a big spike when there's a headline, and then it kind of comes off and it says, okay, nobody's turning off the spigot, so okay, we're fine. But I think the concern that people have is that people are saying, oh, this is different. This one's different. This one's different.
Well, I mean, yeah, unfortunately, 3,500 people have been killed since last weekend. You know, 2.5 in Gaza and, you know, 1,000 in Israel. It's tragic. And that aside, it's unfortunately, we have to kind of park that humanitarian issue, and it's tragic, and thoughts with everyone. But for what it means fundamentally to oil, I agree. But I just think that the narrative that is coming out of, say, Netanyahu, you know, get ready for the next phase when he was in front of the frontline soldiers yesterday, it's a very aggressive narrative. I certainly have never known it as aggressive. People are calling me who have never sort of read the news properly as such. People are naive to it who aren't in that region and are concerned. And I think that that's reflective in what markets are doing. I don't think it's knee-jerk, because arguably there was a knee-jerk reaction on Monday. And then as events unfolded, it seemed to sort of, I say calm down, but reaction wasn't as aggressive as many people priced in. But then it picked up again on Friday. And it seems to have picked up a lot more over the weekend as well. Well,
I mean, we don't know what prices are going to do yet because markets haven't opened yet. But I think Friday shows nobody wants to be short going into a weekend when you have a conflict, an escalating conflict in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And that's why I think what we'll see next week is that we'll see a gradual sell-off again, like we did the week prior, and then going into the next weekend, they'll rally right back up again. I mean,
okay, you heard it first here, people. Edward says it gets sold off. I don't say that at all. I mean, what do we see? Brent 7.5% up on the week. Gasoil 7% up. 321 crack back above $20 a barrel. You know we love that bellwether. Did anything happen with freight?
Not so much with freight. Actually had a move up on both the FFAs and on standard freight. So okay. There's a supportive action on tanker freight at the moment. And, you know, that can just be attributed also that Q4 has always been the strong tanker freight market historically because of the increased demand for distillates in the Northern Hemisphere, which means a lot more distillate-rich crudes have to move around, which are longer lead time products. So typically it's always been a stronger freight market in Q4 and Q1.
Yeah.
So I think that's just being reflective of that. But, you know, one thing when we circling back to distillate, I mean, the other piece of geopolitical tension that kind of got short shrifted by what's going on in the Middle East is the pipeline damage on the Finland-Estonia feeder for natural gas. And that's what contributed mainly to the rally that we see in gas oil prices that happened over the week. Prior to the settlement of the gas oil contract in Europe, gas oil markets were actually trending lower, moving lower, and then there was a mystery explosion, or a mystery seismic event on the nat gas feeder pipeline from Finland to Estonia, which also damaged a communications line. But put people into question: is there something else brewing in the North Sea when it comes to nat gas supplies as we're going into the winter?
Yeah, I mean that's it's funny because 15th of October, we're a sixth of the way into Q4. People are starting to write letters to Santa. Have you been a good boy, Edwards? I sincerely hope so. But yeah, nat gas, they did have a rally last week. I think that's probably myriad issues. We wrote a piece about it. My colleague Adam wrote a piece about it. There was one field in Egypt that got temporarily halted. Doesn't make a great deal in the scheme of things, but then noise about, more strikes in Australia, and then obviously the issue in Finland. Nat gas did have a roof for this.
It was a 27% rally on the week.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a massive move higher. And gas oil in conjunction had about a 9% increase in rally, which both of those points point to, that is the general fear of energy disruption for the wintertime, especially when you think natural gas. The only caveat to the natural gas situation is, okay, Europe's at 95% capacity for nat gas storage. Plus there's other stuff on the water. So it is a case of how cold it will be versus the impact of that feeder pipeline being damaged. But it does relate back into gas oil, because nat gas is needed to hydrotreat your gas oil streams to make ULSD, which is the primary diesel traded and used in the European household for heat as well as for trucking.
Yeah.
And so if you have a curtailment of natural gas supplies, it obviously puts a strain on your ability to produce diesel, which, again, with the current inventory levels inside of Europe, makes diesel could be extremely tight if that happens.
Yeah, just sticking in on distillates. We wrote a piece on Friday on jet fuel demand, which we think Q4 will be back to pre-pandemic levels in the States. And, I've got to say, the demand story, which lots of people have been neg about, and we spoke about last week in China, we said it last week as well, before the figures came out, that Chinese demand, Golden Week was 14% higher year on year. People are moving about a lot more. Chinese crude oil buying is at record levels. I mean, the demand side of the coin, apart from gasoline demand in the States,
and Europe,
doesn't look too bad.
Well, 14% year on year. I mean, last year was a pretty low level.
Yeah, but I mean, like I'm saying, China about for US gasoline demand. I think we might have said about a year ago, actually, when we first started the podcast, was we'd always thought it peaked. And how much relevance does EIA data have anymore? It does on crude, but like you said, to start with, the US is now a net exporter of oil. And has displaced actually Saudi a few weeks ago. My colleague Matt wrote about it as well. So how much focus how much price activity can be attributed to what's happening on oil demand in the States? I'm pretty sure it's still some, but not as much as it used to be. But when you've got headlines coming out from China saying that September crude imports rise from a year ago as travel manufacturing recovers, I think that's a positive story if you're in the oil market.
Well, it's interesting because the information out of China doesn't show that yet. It still shows that you've had negative imports, negative exports, negative 6.8, 6.9% year on year. So you're still not showing anything of that type of export-import demand increase to show higher increase in manufacturing. PMI finally ticked above 50, but marginally above 50 for the first time this year. That was last year's reading, or last month's reading.
That's growth, baby. That's growth, baby.
So I wouldn't be popping the champagne corks just yet on Chinese.
No, and I don't. I think those corks will be firmly within bottles, but I don't see the doom and gloom as much as I was. I don't see the doom and gloom at all, actually. I mean, Jamie Dimon was out this week. You know, JP Morgan had a $39 billion Q3, not bad. A couple of Hamptons houses, I'm sure, will be purchased, according to him, and other people. He's warned, as he did last year. He said in Q3 2022, or October last year, that the US will tip into recession in 6 to 9 months. It hasn't. Lots of the major economies have stacked up remarkably well, considering how bearish people were. Okay, EU aside, right? And I'm not being dismissive of the EU because I'm British, but I'm just saying Germany and EU data aside, it's been in recession for a while and it's slowly building back up. The UK are as well. But China, certain parts of the barrel in the States, like I said, jet fuel, is doing remarkably well. And so are other places as well. You know, Middle East is booming. Southeast Asia is growing. I would argue that the needle is turning somewhat.
Well, the IMF would disagree with you. IMF and the World Bank. Again, kind of overshadowed by what was going on this week in the Middle East, but the IMF World Bank meetings were going on this week, and they're basically characterizing that the economy is actually getting worse in the world. So they have economic growth slowing from 3.5% last year to 3% for this year now. So they've downgraded this year's GDP number by 0.1, and they've downgraded next year's GDP number by 0.1 to 2.9%. So that doesn't show robust growth anywhere in the world. That's the global GDP level, which should also impact global oil demand, which then puts a light on who's going to be correct, the IEA or OPEC, when it comes to actual oil demand.
Exactly, and this is the subjective argument, right? So, who do you listen to, or how does a trader react? He looks at an IMF headline, he looks at an IEA one, looks at an OPEC. I'd argue he doesn't look at any of them. He probably looks at, not dismissed, but I think it's probably put in a pot, stirred around, and ultimately it's some growth. Is it as good as he was hoping for? China has disappointed this year compared to what it was going to do, but it seems to have made the turn that many people were hoping for. People were hoping for this turn probably coming into Q2, but now we're going into Q4. I think that ship be turning, boy.
Well, my only detractor to Chinese turning is we're now in Christmas order season, and container freight is still in the doldrums.
Still crap, is it?
It's not showing any real uptick in demand. You have producer prices in demand in China still at negative numbers, showing a deflationary impact, not an inflationary impact, which you would assume with growth. So PPI numbers are going negative, and you've got container freight still negative. You've got exports still negative out of China. It doesn't mean that China's demand is going supernova. And it's not even, I don't think it's going to be anything where it needs to be for people to be satisfied with it going into 2024.
Yeah.
You also have the underlying pin in China of the property crisis that is still there. Countries.
Well, that property story isn't seemingly going anywhere for the last 18 months.
No, it's just been going worse.
Yeah, I'm pretty. Look, if you're gonna have a skeptic in me, which there always is one, as you know, I would say that it will be. If it does go really wrong, the government will bail it out. Right? It's as simple as that. So I don't think that it's being looked as anything tangible.
No, that's the prevailing wisdom, is that the government's going to bail out all the people who have made these investments in property in China, and that's why it gets kind of ignored. If anything, it's a headline, but it gets ignored because the government will bail them out. It doesn't matter. They can't let the property market fail. It doesn't matter. Kind of smells like what happened in 2008 in the United States.
Well, yeah, but I don't think there'll be a Hollywood blockbuster starring. Who was in that? Jeremy Irons?
No, not Jeremy Irons. It was the guy that did The Office, the comedian.
David Brent.
No, not David Brent. Margot Robbie was in it. So was.
Oh, that's The Big Short. Oh, you mean
Short.
Yeah. Okay. Now there is another trading one called Margin Call, which is good. You should watch that one. That's a good one. Anyway, enough about Hollywood blockbusters. I don't think. I don't know. Look, it's been one of those years where I think everyone's kind of met you and gone, oh, everything's crap, hate life, and then gone to their desk and bought everything, and just not telling you. It's kind of been one of those years where everyone seems to have done all right. There hasn't been, I was looking at it from a real skeptical point of view as well. I haven't heard many sort of bankruptcies this year. I've heard of people consolidated their balance sheets. The oil markets have been stable. ExxonMobil this week agreed, what was it, a $60 billion takeover of Pioneer Resources, the biggest takeover or oil deal from a C-suite level in 20 years.
Well, you say that, but bankruptcy filings in the United States are up 10% year on year.
Well, okay, fine, but I'm sorry about a pizzeria in New Hampshire that's gone out of business. What about, I'm talking about people who are, moving the needle. The oil market went through a brutal time a few years ago. You had Gulf Petchem, you had Agri-Trade, you obviously had Hindi Ong.
Yeah, but all that was fraud. And that's all those, they didn't go bankrupt because their business went bad. They went bankrupt because they were caught doing fraud.
So has the market consolidated?
In what regards?
Just in terms of, is it tidied itself up? Has the market become showed a bit more integrity than it has done for a while? Look, I mean, that's a rhetorical thing. I'm just saying
that's for a discussion in a pub.
Yeah, well, we're good at those. Join us at the next one, people. You just, the way I look at things is that it's been a fairly stable year. I mean, prices around the same.
But I want to again go back to your bankruptcy statement. I'm just pulling up some data here. Bankruptcies in the EU are up 8.4% in 2023 year on year. So it may be a lot of small businesses that get impacted, but those small businesses also spend money. They also support the economy. They also drive cars. They also drive delivery trucks. They also ask for deliveries to come in.
Yeah, but okay, fine. I mean, that's a fact you're throwing at me. How does that reflect year on year? Is that higher than last year, lower than last year?
They're higher than last year. Bankruptcies are up because there's a lot of things that have happened in this last year, which a lot of companies can't deal with, and even in the oil sector. I mean, interest rates going from
I was going to say, is that an interest rate story?
Where they're at now, and where they're potentially going to go in the future, and if they're going to stay at these levels, there's a lot of people in this industry that have never experienced 5% interest rates. Because it's been nary of almost 20 years that we've had, 15 years we've had these extremely low interest rates, only to ramp up here recently. And so a lot of businesses that were built and designed were designed to handle this type of interest rate flow. When you have these interest rates going up, yet you don't have a corresponding increase in premiums to go along with them, you get squeezed on your cost of financing versus what you can cover when you actually buy and sell your goods.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that is going to be a reaction to what happens with in a higher interest rate environment. I agree with you.
And you do hear it with a lot of smaller trading shops who are having trouble financing the 10,000 ton cargo or a 5,000 ton cargo, which was the staple of their business.
Yeah,
because they just don't have the cash nor the cash flow to really cover that new financing regime.
Yeah, I mean, look, in other news, Dubai is booming on the back of that sort of movement of people. I mean, it's funny because a mate of mine, I was talking to a couple of mates the other day down a drinking establishment, maybe. And they were all saying seasonality has shifted in the Middle East. I mean, everyone I know used to go home for Christmas. It was a nice time. You wanted it to be cold, hoping for a white Christmas. You'd be around family. And in the end of the day, it would just be annoying because it'd be about 10 degrees with drizzle and rain, and you had to drive everywhere, and the kids weren't happy, and you couldn't get a taxi, and everything's expensive. Now the whole Middle East seems to be consumed with people wanting to come over for Christmas. Trading patterns are changing, and Christmas is an interesting one because more and more people I know, their parents are coming over here for 2 or 3 months of the year. There is a big shift, and it's a new shift in how people are sort of moving about.
Well, I mean, Dubai has had an influx of about 500,000 people since the Ukrainian war broke out, with all the moving of traders and trader shops into Dubai to take advantage of the regulatory regime there and take advantage of the cash flow regimes there. So that is going to change trading pattern, because when you have that many people move into a city, they're going to absorb people coming in. They're going to have family visit. They're going to visit family. So you are going to see an increase in Dubai. So you might see a change in Dubai. I don't know if you'll see the same change in the rest of the world. Yeah,
Middle East, the Middle East. I mean, I heard a figure the other day that currently there is, in terms of construction, there, I think globally it's $3 trillion worth of construction that's going on in the world, or something stupid like that, of which 60% is from Saudi.
Yeah, because they're building this big, long, narrow city, aren't they?
It's incredible. It's extraordinary. Anyway, apart from us arguing about where prices are going this week, which is always good, we like an argument. What else have we got going on before we wrap up?
Well, the FMOC meeting coming up at the end of the month of October. I mean, that's going to be the one where are we going to get the extra quarter point basis hike? And I think the data out of the U.S. is pointing to a quarter point basis hike, which should be the last one for the year.
Okay.
I don't think we see any pivot on interest rates anytime soon because, again, unemployment is fairly strong or fairly weak. Inflation is still very strong. And so in order to get any type of pivot back, we need to see an inverse of that, increased unemployment and, lower inflation rates.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all, for me, it's all about what's going to happen with the continuing, the next meeting, FOMC meeting, 31st to the 1st November 2023. So what's that, Thursday, the 2nd of November, we'll see that interest rate decision. To me, it's all focused on what's happening in Israel, and
that's always in the prompt. That's in the prompt. I mean, that's the way you do that.
Yeah, I mean, for the next I mean, you see what Netanyahu's saying. He said, "Are you ready for what is coming? More is coming." He says in an aggressive video. I mean, it's like I said, the narrative is very aggressive. I don't think that anything will be. Other things will be put against it, of course. You know what's going to happen. Data out of China, more and more data will emerge about what demand looked like in Golden Week. We're in the middle of turnaround season now. People are buying. 15th of October. People are now filling the last of December cargoes for what they need. So, yeah, I just think it's all eyes on Israel and what happens. Reading between the headlines, hearing what may happen from surrounding countries. I can't see the focus. I think that's 80% of a trader's focus this week, if I'm honest.
Which is kind of interesting that with all the strife in Israel and Palestine and the Gaza Strip, there is nary a word of Ukraine anymore in the press.
Well, unfortunately, that is what a news value is worth, isn't it? I agree with you. Yeah, it's a difficult one, and what pisses me off more than anything is that the BBC constantly have to justify themselves for being an impartial news agency. I just think. People are too busy these days about covering their own arse rather than covering news properly. So, all you journalists out there, we love you, but fucking get a grip sometimes, please. That's a rant out of the way.
We might need to get a bleeper on that one.
Bleep. Are there any kids listening? Sorry. Your Uncle Matt says sorry. Actually, that sounds a bit weird. Don't scrap that bit. But no. Yeah, let's see what happens. We closed up 489 on December. Brent $90.89 per barrel. We settled. Rest of the curve went up fairly linear. I think we'll go up to. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw $100 this week. I really wouldn't. I'm not sure how the market will react tomorrow. I think it'd be similar to last week, sort of between $2 and $3 a barrel, something like that. But we'll have to wait and see.
Well, I said you've got your $100. We'll probably end up again right around $90 again by the end of the week. We'll go all the way down to 84, 85 again and rally back up on Thursday, Friday.
You let us know, people. Hit the comments, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know, what is your opinion? What do you think? I'm not saying, look, neither of us want to be right effectively. It's not like, oh, I won the bet. It's unfortunately an oil market at the moment that's being priced out of peril and of civil unrest and politics and wars. It's shit, but we have to form an opinion. That's the idea. So let us know what you think.
Yep. Click climate. Click climate. Oh my God. Thank you, Glenn.
Climate. Greta, get out.
Like, comment, and subscribe, please.
Nearly got there. Come on. Sunday morning. Like, comment, subscribe, please.
Yes. You all have a good day, and we'll speak to you next week.
Ciao.